news, all the bad stuff that is shown on the news is not even, that's only the stuff that is
that actually they got on camera.
That got on camera. You know, that's not the stuff that happens every single day, and just not even, you know, just the general day-to-day living, which is so difficult. Is people don't know that.
The crisis in Zimbabwe is more complex and devastating than anyone can imagine. How can one define a situation that has got so many elements, issues, and a colonial legacy to consider?
Well, the current situation is one that has been developing over the last close to 10 years, one of rapid economic decline and the closure of the democratic space. So what we've tended to find, therefore, is more and more repressive measures being put in place by the government of Zimbabwe.
The legacy and name of Cecil John Rhodes has remarkably lived on through Rhodes University, as well as the great influx of Zimbabweans who come to study at Rhodes.
Rhodes, obviously, founded via resources that were bequeathed to the university by, Cecil John Rhodes. And I do understand that there were scholarships or, dedicated funds to bring in students from then what was Southern Rhodesia and then Rhodesia to come to study in Grahamstown.
Zimbabwean students have made Rhodes University a home away from home. Most of the Zimbabwean students at Rhodes experience a student life and culture that does not differ too much from life back home. Amongst the Zimbabwean students, there's an intense nationalism for Zimbabwe, despite the crisis there.
This feels like home. I mean, there are a lot of Zimbabweans on campus, so it's more of a second home to Zimbabweans. We speak Shona or Ndebele, whichever applies, and it feels great.
Because I don't really feel like a foreigner, which is kind of odd because as a Zimbabwean, I'm in South Africa. I should really feel like I'm in a whole new different place, but I really do feel like I'm in Zim, like an extension of Zimbabwe.
It has become evident that the Zimbabwean students have also brought the tensions and divisions across the border with them. Such tensions reveal themselves in the attitudes and behaviors of Zimbabwean students on Rhodes campus.
I don't want to talk about politics, eh?
Why don't you want to talk about politics?
Because it's dangerous.
Dangerous?
I've said too much.
But I also think that intimidation is tied to some students just fearing that, whatever statements they utter could bring all sorts of consequences to themselves and maybe to their families in Zimbabwe.
It's far more a tacit understanding that if people speak out, there are students at Rhodes who are paid by ZANU-PF to be here, who keep an eye on what's going on and report back. And if they do anything that the government doesn't approve of, their parents could be beaten up, their house could be burned, they could be arrested when they go back across the border, they could lose their funding or student visa, they could never get Forex ever again, etc. So there's a real concern.
Last year, I heard a couple of guys were beaten up around Ichu because they were raising issues relating to Zimbabwe and they were criticizing the government, and so they got beaten up.
You have to understand these are controversial issues and it's very difficult for someone to take a stand.
When people actually come forward, we investigate as far as possible, and in the case of the march organizer, we actually ensured that she was safe over the holiday and we placed her in a safe location. We also are working with her to try and apply for refugee status because she can't go back to Zimbabwe.
Felicity Sabindi is a third-year politics student from Zimbabwe. Sabindi is extremely outspoken against the gross human rights violations going on in Zimbabwe. She organized a demonstration that took place in March of this year.
Being in a safe house was very quiet. I got time, to just settle down and be me for a bit. It was because there were police looking for me. They came to the university, with the picture, and they said, "Who is this and where do we find her?" And the university did a good job of not showing them who I was. And it's great that they didn't ask a student who would have randomly showed them, because, us as Rhodes students, we're rather friendly, and we'll say, "Oh, no, she's over there." So there was a couple of conversations. I'll call it a conversation I had with a young man who was reminding me of what happened the last time a girl tried to actually say something openly about the situation in Zimbabwe. And basically this girl's family had been beaten up the next day. So it was a tense conversation. It was I felt like I was being threatened, but when you can't pin someone down. Anyway, so that was hectic. And then the guys in the T-shirts, they didn't say anything to me or anything. They just stood there looking really big and scary.
Sabindi was also involved in organizing a candlelight vigil held on Zimbabwean Independence Day.
Well, a vigil is a lot calmer compared to the march. A lot of people thought the march was very aggressive, and they thought it would, it would inspire political action against people who came. So we thought a vigil in a cathedral, dark, very relaxed and prayerful. We thought that would probably help encourage people to come.
Generally, Zimbabweans on campus are really quiet about everything that's going on, and they don't comment on the vigil or the march. And so this is just maybe to provoke people and just for them to write on the wall what they think, whether they agree with everything or not.
Despite rare protest action, the majority of Zimbabwean students on campus do not want to speak out against the Mugabe regime. This stems from an intense fear of what might happen to their loved ones back in Zimbabwe.
When people have been directly confronted, they've come and discussed the matter with us, but for the most part, they haven't wanted to lay direct charges for fear of reprisal.
On the issue of intimidation, our stand is totally clear. It is totally unacceptable, and we will do whatever we have to do to protect these particular individuals.
What are your views on the reports of intimidation on campus?
I think they're unfounded, personally, because I think that the Zimbabwean government has a lot more to worry about than some students at Rhodes. Well, I don't think it's anyone's thing to point fingers at anyone, because we all make mistakes. Maybe there have been decisions that have gone wrong, but it's a young country, and I think we're just going through those mistakes right now.
It's loyalty. If your father's a minister and you say something against the government, that's deep. That's saying something against your father. Yeah. I think it's loyalty. I've met a couple who agree with that, things are wrong and things are happening that shouldn't happen in Zim, but they can't come out and say it simply because they would rather push rubbish propaganda than say an outright, no, this is wrong statement, because at home, if someone catches them or hears about it, they'll probably be in more trouble than we'd be, because if it's your father.
I think the media in general has tended to overestimate the capability of the Zimbabwean government's wrath, so to speak, which they say is... I'm hearing stories about people living in safe houses. I think that's really, 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 really baseless. I think it's only fair to give a fair account of what's happening. If we're not being intimidated, let's not talk about it. There are people who go around wearing ZANU-PF T-shirts. Big deal, so what, No,
definitely there are things that are happening back home, but you can't really say that it's serious to talk about. There are certain things that are happening, but we've also got a very, democratic system of dealing with what's happening back home. We have a democratically elected government, and I'm sure they're taking the right steps to rectify what's happening at home.
I think that, first and foremost, let's stop talking about it.
Some people would rather not take a stand, and just like you respect the rights of those people who are taking a stand, you also have to respect the rights of those people who don't take a stand. And I don't think there should be questioned as to why they didn't attend. I think it's a matter of personal choice.
The history of any struggle has had to involve the youth, and at one point or the other, the youth have to find themselves in a struggle for a democratic society. The Zimbabwean students here, is their primary role. It's not the role of South African students or other international students to come in and lead the cause for Zimbabwe. It's the students that are here that have to recognize, go beyond just the selfishness or their own needs, as it were, to recognize the greater need, which is actually that we need a democratic Zimbabwe. So they have to take a stand. And unfortunately, we're at a time where everybody will have to take a stand. And those that don't take a stand at this point, I think history will judge them quite harshly.